They detected it weeks before they dared to believe it was real, a whisper buried deep inside the cosmic microwave background, repeating across every spectrum. Not static. Not noise. But rhythm. A structured, coded song. Its origin? From inside the same black hole no one was supposed to survive. It pulsed once every 88 minutes, each tone matched to a frequency human ears should not comprehend, yet those who listened swore they felt it, in their dreams, in their bones. It wasn't calling for help. It was inviting them back. The crew had long since passed through that region of space and never intended to return. But this was different. The ship had changed. They had changed. Some believed the signal was them echoes of their own past selves trying to reach across timelines. Others insisted it was something else entirely, an archive, a repository built not from matter but from memory. The decision to turn around was not made in haste, nor with certainty. It was made in silence, with each crew member entering a new kind of pact, not with Earth, not with each other, but with the unknown. As they approached the black hole again, things felt different. It wasn't the size, nor the gravity. It was the feeling of being expected. The event horizon shimmered this time. No longer a curtain of fear, but a gate reactive, aware. As they passed through, the signal sharpened. Now it was speaking in coordinates. Rooms. Vaults. Memories. The ship adjusted course on its own. No one protested. They knew it was leading them to the archive. They found it not beneath the spire, nor beyond the light, but beneath the event horizon's pulse, where time folded like origami and space grew soft. A vast library, miles wide, carved from voidstone and illuminated by memory light. Each chamber held pieces of lives never lived. One room showed Earth with 2 suns. Another displayed a version of the ship with no crew, only dust. In one, a child sat drawing spirals on glass, though no child had ever been on board. They wandered in reverence. Not collecting. Not cataloging. Just witnessing. The archive was not for taking. It was for remembering, but not their own lives. Someone else's. Something else's. Every corridor was a prayer. Every whisper, a confession of a civilization that had long since faded, yet had preserved its soul and song. The crew listened, and as they moved deeper, they began to remember things they had never known. The chamber had no doors, no obvious entry point. It simply was, as though it had always existed, waiting for witnesses rather than visitors. The walls pulsed with a dim amber glow, not from lights, but from glyphs etched so deeply into the material they seemed to bleed time. Symbols neither human nor alien, they weren't meant to be read but remembered. The crew stood silently, entranced, for the air in this place was heavier, not with mass, but with memory. The archive had brought them here not by chance, but by recognition. It had searched their neural patterns, their ancestral threads, and found resonance, buried myths, half-remembered dreams of beings once worshipped as gods. Not entities of wrath or glory, but keepers. In the center of the room stood 6 thrones, empty, immense, carved from voidstone so black it swallowed light. Each one was shaped uniquely, one encased in vines made of frozen plasma, another swirling with echolite, another smooth as bone, humming with breath that didn't come from air. These were not seats of command. They were tombs or altars. The crew spread out, not speaking, as if a single word might fracture the delicate truth suspended around them. And then, sound returned. Not from outside. From within. Each crew member heard a different voice, ancient yet familiar. Some wept, others froze. It wasn't language, it was memory made sound. One fell to his knees, trembling, muttering in a tongue not his own. Another reached out and touched the nearest throne, and in that instant, was shown entire galaxies collapsing into prayer. The thrones were not empty because their owners had died. They were empty because they were the owners now. Each one had been summoned by the archive not to observe history, but to become part of it, a new cycle. In this room, they were not researchers, not explorers. They were chosen continuations of an eternal mind, broken and scattered across time, waiting for suitable vessels. The symbols began to glow brighter, their meanings burning themselves into the bones of the living. The gods were not gone. They had simply fragmented. This was not a room of remembrance. It was a forge. And they were being remade, not in flesh, but in function. A single question filled the air, unspoken but undeniable: will you hold what we once held? No answers were needed. The room already knew. The moment they stepped beyond the Chamber of Thrones, space stopped behaving like space. Walls didn't end, and corridors didn't lead. There were no doors, only decisions. The archive was no longer a structure, it had become a sensation, one that wrapped around their senses, folding sight into emotion, and time into suggestion. And then it appeared, a vast chamber without form, lit by something that wasn't light. Hanging at its heart was a map, or something pretending to be one. It floated weightlessly, suspended in stillness, spinning so slowly it felt eternal. Not etched or drawn, but alive, formed from threads of radiant memory and the faintest vapors of dreams. No stars. No systems. Only lines, infinite, curving, intersecting like the nervous system of a divine creature dreaming the cosmos into place. And the lines pulsed with colors they could feel more than see. Each strand represented a decision never made, a path never taken. No stars. No systems. Only lines. Infinite, curving, intersecting like the nervous system of a divine creature dreaming the cosmos into place. And the lines pulsed with colors they could feel more than see. Each strand represented a decision never made, a path never taken. The chamber dissolved. They stood in a marketplace of a world they had never visited, but somehow belonged to. Children played with devices that shaped gravity. Skyships hovered above, tethered to moons instead of anchors. And then it flickered. They were in another scene. Then another. A city underwater. A desert world where time ran backward. A corridor lined with mirrors showing lives they had never lived, but still mourned. The map was not for navigation. It was for witnessing. It didn't show where they could go, it showed where they already had, in echoes, in versions of themselves scattered across probability. Some screamed. Others stood in awe. One crew member simply smiled and whispered, "I remember being all of them." And in that moment, the map shifted again. A single thread, smaller than the rest, dim, blinked once. Slowly. As if waiting. It wasn't part of any known reality. It was a choice none of them had yet made. One that had never been observed, only offered. The archive was not asking for a destination. It was demanding they choose a storyline. One that could not be undone. The map began to tremble. Not in threat, but in invitation. And as the crew stood before it, they realized the next step would not take them forward, or back, but sideways, into a version of existence that had no memory of Earth, of time, or even of them. They wouldn't be lost. They would be rewritten. They stepped into the thread, not through it, not around it, but as it. Reality didn't shatter. It split. At first, it was subtle, a flicker in the color of their suits, a whispered word that echoed before being spoken. But then, like light through a broken prism, existence began to refract around them. One moment they stood in the archive, the next, on a shoreline beneath twin moons, with glass tides lapping at the sand. They weren't dreaming. The map had woven them into one of its own possibilities. And this one was alive. The air shimmered with memory light. Trees grew backwards, unspooling their branches into the soil, and the stars above were not stars, but watching eyes, each blinking with the rhythm of a long-forgotten name. As they walked, they saw versions of themselves at the edge of their vision, reflections walking beside them but never quite in sync. One cried. One bled. One turned and vanished the moment it was seen. This world, this echo of a path untaken, was haunted not by ghosts, but by consequences. The choices they never made had taken root here, flowering into events that never belonged to them, yet held their fingerprints. A mountain of broken timepieces stood ahead, ticking out of rhythm. One crew member approached, placing a hand upon the heap, and collapsed. Not from pain, but from overload. He saw his life play out in reverse, then forward again, then sideways into a version where he never joined the mission, where he stayed on Earth and died nameless. Forgotten. The others helped him up, but something in his eyes had changed, as if part of him was still watching from one of those fractured paths. The sky rippled. The world reacted to their presence, shifting terrain as if unsure where to place them. The archive hadn't just shown them the map, it had thrown them into its variables. They weren't observers anymore. They were test subjects in a simulation so ancient, so vast, it had developed self-awareness. And that awareness was asking, how many versions of you can you carry before you fracture? They pressed forward, now surrounded by shards of lives collapsing into each other. Architecture bled into landscape. Sounds became colors. Emotions took physical form. They weren't walking anymore, they were becoming. And in the distance, barely visible through the layers of broken dimensions, was the silhouette of something vast, a being, perhaps, or a city, or an idea holding it all together. Not a god. Not a machine. A witness. The one who never forgot any version. And it had just turned to face them. It didn't move. It didn't speak. Yet the moment their eyes found it, they knew it had been watching them since long before they entered the archive, before the mission, before Earth, perhaps even before time itself assembled its first breath. The witness was not a creature, not entirely. It was made of motion and stillness in equal measure, as if the concept of memory had taken form and chosen a shape impossible to describe. Its body was stitched from flickering moments, layered across one another like pages in a book caught mid-flip. You couldn't look at it, only through it. Within its presence, everything they had ever forgotten began to rise like mist. Childhood dreams. Faces of strangers passed in long corridors. Regrets so deeply buried they had stopped feeling like wounds. It didn't invade their minds, it reflected them. And not just who they were, but every version of who they could have been. For each crew member, the witness appeared differently. To one, it was a mother lost to illness; to another, a ship they never built; to the third, it took their own face and whispered with their own voice. It spoke in images, in patterns, in raw understanding. They didn't hear words. They felt relevance. The message was simple: I remember all that you've been. But do you? Around them, the world began to crumble, not in violence, but in acceptance. The thread of possibility they'd entered was reaching its end. That was its nature, each choice had a limit, a conclusion. But the witness had no such boundaries. It existed outside the story. And now it was offering them a terrible mercy to leave behind the weight of choice, of branching realities, of eternal fragmentation, and become still. One mind. One memory. One final truth. The room faded into starlight, and they stood suspended in a sky of recollection. Billions of moments, some theirs, most not, twinkled around them. One of the crew stepped forward, reaching toward the witness with both hands. He was tired. Tired of being many people. Tired of infinite lives. The witness blinked. And in that blink, he vanished, not killed, not erased, but absorbed into the continuity of remembrance. Not dead, just kept. The others hesitated. What was left of them after so much fracture? Could they go back? Could they still call themselves themselves? And beneath it all, a chilling awareness settled in: the archive had never been recording history. It had been searching, waiting for a mind capable of holding more than one truth. And now, it had found them. The witness tilted its shimmering head. Not beckoning. Not warning. Waiting. The decision was theirs. For now. Time, once a river, was now a sea without shores. The witness stood still, yet all around it the archive responded, not with sound, but adjustment. The space restructured itself to match the uncertainty of the crew's indecision. One among them had already been absorbed, leaving a stillness in their place like a sentence left unfinished. The remaining ones drifted between roles, no longer explorers, not yet relics. And then the archive presented it, the choice. Not in form, but in feeling. It offered no options, only awareness. Accept and be gathered. resist, and be scattered. Return, and forget. A simple triad. But with each thread came consequence. Acceptance would make them eternal, yes, but disintegrate their sense of individuality. Resistance meant breaking free, but becoming untraceable through time. Return, though comforting, would sever their memory of everything learned, as if none of this had happened at all. They debated in whispers. One argued for becoming. One longed for resistance. One feared forgetting more than death. As they stood before the choice, time's framework loosened. Their ship, far above in real space, flickered in and out of existence. Their bodies thinned like fog. The archive was not punishing them. It was showing them what came next, depending on what they chose. Time was no longer a road. It was clay. And in that moment, each step forward meant erasing a version of the universe that might have been. Not metaphor. Not symbolism. Actual collapse of unrealized timelines. And so the choice wasn't personal. It was cosmic. They were not deciding for themselves, but for all other versions of themselves scattered across the archive's echoing reach. Whatever they chose would become the only version that had ever existed. The moment the choice was made, the archive responded not as machine or God, but as witness itself. It folded inward, and with it, folded the stars. The crew, or what was left of them, emerged into a landscape they had never entered, but which had always known them. It was a vast plain, infinite in stretch, where the sky was not made of clouds but of names, their own, written in stars. Billions of them. Each glowing inscription represented a version of who they might have been, might still be, might never be again. Some names faded, others blinked wildly, and a few burned so bright they couldn't be seen directly. They walked the plain in reverence. It wasn't heaven. It was history. A physical space forged entirely from memory. Beneath their feet were pathways carved not by footfall, but by significance, emotional footprints left behind by choices with weight. And yet, the air here carried no fear. Only clarity. The sky was telling them that their lives, all of them, had been real. Even the imagined ones. The archive didn't care about truth in the traditional sense. It cared about impact. What a life did to time. What a moment did to memory. What a whisper did to reality. And here, for the first time, the crew felt understood. Not judged, not corrected, but held. Not by the archive. Not by any intelligence. But by the very fabric of remembrance. For the first time since entering the black hole, they felt no pull. No command. No fear. The sky had remembered them, because they had finally remembered themselves. It came not as light, but as warmth. A subtle hum that passed through them like blood rediscovering a heartbeat. The archive began its final ritual, not of farewell, but of bequeathment. In this place of memories that never happened, they were now the guardians. Not of facts, but of potential. The archive had chosen them because they had dared to observe without control. They had witnessed without collapsing the waveform. The crew were no longer researchers, but heirs. Inheritance did not come in the form of technology, or knowledge, or even power, but in permission. The permission to exist outside chronology. To carry the weight of lives they hadn't lived, and to protect them. Their minds began to fill with impossible awareness of forgotten civilizations, broken gods, futures that never solidified, and echoes of wars fought in silence between thoughts. It wasn't madness. It was capacity. Their memories now included other versions of Earth, other species, other archives. They were not alone in the archive, they were the archive. Every other soul that had ever entered and survived was now within them. The price of inheritance was scale. The reward? To become the last editors of reality's footnotes. And in doing so, make sure nothing was ever truly lost again. After eternity had passed, or perhaps only seconds, the archive offered one last path. A gate. Not in front of them, but within them. Each crew member felt it pulse from inside their ribs, behind their eyes. A warm fold in the fabric of their being, like a scar they had been born with but only just now noticed. The gate did not lead out. It led through. Through memory. Through the idea of self. Through the myth of finality. If they stepped through, they would not emerge on the other side of the black hole, or in another universe, or even as beings. They would emerge as function. Concepts with awareness. Living archives. Preservers of unlived time. Guardians of stories never spoken. But stepping through meant surrendering the last thread of human identity. Names. Faces. The taste of rain. The sound of Earth's gravity. They stood before the gate, each of them now both haunted and holy. There was no ceremony. No farewell. Just choice. One by one, they passed through. No tears. No flash of light. Just integration. Now, there is nothing left of them to see. No trace. No broadcast. The ship is gone. The mission ended before it ever began. At least, according to time as we know it. But in quiet moments, on nights when the stars shimmer strangely, some swear they can feel something. A pause in the rhythm of reality. A whisper between seconds. Not voices. Not warnings. Just presence. Somewhere beyond the reach of time, the crew remains. Not as ghosts. Not as gods. But as memory itself. The archive did not consume them. It became them. And now, whenever something is remembered that was never spoken, whenever a dream carries the weight of a world that doesn't exist, whenever silence feels too full, that is them. The stewards of the unlived. The curators of might-have-beens. The keepers of the archive below the event horizon. And they are listening.